after reviewing slash explaining all of these classic novels and why I think that they should be read to children, why I think they are important children's stories, whether they are being read to children or children are reading them themselves, I thought I would share some books that I really enjoyed later on, maybe like 12 through till now, I guess, that I would consider to be modern classics or contemporary classics. So these books are, actually one of them is a classic, my bad, but books that I really enjoyed and I thought were of the same quality as classic novels. The first one, we'll start off with the classic, shall we, is Murder on the Orient Express. This one is probably for people who are a little bit older, maybe like 13 through till any age really. The plot line follows a bunch of strangers who are on a train and mysteriously this man dies and they can't figure out why, and they're stuck in the train because there is a snowstorm and there is a detective, Poirot. I haven't read this book in a little while. I'm pretty sure his name is Poirot, and it's his job to find out who murdered this man. And the man who was murdered, his name was Ratchet. Just had to quickly look that up. And so basically the plot is just Poirot trying to figure out who it is, and it's quite a short book. It's only this long. It's a very gripping read. He interviews each of the people on the train and tries to figure out why on earth they would want to kill this man, if it was them that killed this man, and the end is a plot twist that I'm sure not many people saw coming. I certainly didn't. Well, not until right at the end, then you can kind of guess it. But yes, a very gripping read for readers aged, I don't know, maybe a 12-year-old could read it. It's a little bit scary at the beginning, but I'd say 13 through till however old. The second book I would like to do is The Boy in Striped Pajamas. This is a book that I actually read at school in English, and we had to, I don't know, we probably had some assignments on this book, but it was a book that I really thoroughly enjoyed reading. It is very sad, but I feel like once you're in high school or middle school even maybe, this book is appropriate because it does deal with a lot of issues, but it is quite light-hearted in that sense. It's about two young boys who become friends. One is the son of a German, a Nazi, basically, and his dad is the facilitator of the concentration camp. And so this little boy becomes friends with a little boy inside the concentration camp, and the bulk of the story is just them sitting on either side of the fence talking to each other, and it is a very heartbreaking book, especially the end, but it's also very enlightening because it really just kind of dissipated the cause of the war, really, or like the main idea of the war, because it was these two little boys couldn't understand why they were essentially almost the same, and yet one little boy is on this side of the fence and one little boy is on the other side of the fence, and their friendship is something that is really a story that is quite inspiring and very eye-opening. It also causes you to it evokes a lot of sympathy, but also this book really does cause you to think, because it's like you're kind of thinking to yourself, if children can't understand the logic behind the Holocaust and behind the war, then what does that say about the people who are enacting it? Yes, a very good read, very sad though, I will warn you. Also, the movie was pretty good as well. Let us see. The third book is The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. Also, The Boy in Striped Pajamas, John Boyne. My bad. Yes, Erin Morgenstern. This book, probably one of the most confusing books I ever read, but simultaneously one of the most gripping books I ever read. The plot begins in all of these places, all around the world, I believe. I haven't read it in a few years. I read it when I was like 15, but I would say this book is for people aged from 12 up again. This book the plot starts in all of these separate places with all of these separate people, and slowly they just kind of come from outside like this and right into the middle, where at the end of the book everything is intertwined, and it's crazy. The writing was absolutely incredible, and also her ability to keep hold of all of the plot that is going on and not be confused and not leave anything out, and it was like every tiny little detail mattered in the end. It was really incredibly gripping. I try to speak about the main premise and the plot of the book, but it really is difficult. It follows this circus where this man is recruiting different acts, and there's a bit of a love story between them, but also the viewers of the circus are completely entranced, and they have this whole kind of out-of-body experience when they're in the circus, and also the circus moves magically, I think. The line between reality and fiction is extremely blurred in this book, which is really, really a very gripping characteristic of the novel. Would highly recommend, and also I would claim this as a modern classic. Let us see. Oh yes, finally. This book inspired me to do a whole year-long project on modern classics and classic literature. It is The Book Thief by Markus Zusak. He is an Australian writer. This book was released in 2005, I'm pretty sure, but this book, probably one of my favorites of all time, I'd say, and definitely one that I would claim is a modern classic based on the criteria that I created over this last year, which I'll not go into. My favourite thing about this novel is the fact that the narrator is Death. So basically what happens in the novel is Death is the narrator, and he basically pops up when anyone dies. It's also set in World War II, so he basically is summoned to wherever Death is. And so he is summoned to this little girl, Liesl Memminger is her name, multiple times throughout her life, not for her death, but the death of others around her. Her little brother dies in the beginning, and it is in World War II, and she's not Jewish, I think. No, she's not. But there is a lot of death around her in, I think it's Munich where she's living. Obviously because of the war, and so Death is just constantly seeing this little girl and kind of telling her story. So basically she is being sent to live elsewhere. Her mother is sending her and her brother to live elsewhere because it's too dangerous where they are, although her brother unfortunately does not make it. She gets sent to live with this couple, I can't exactly remember their names, but they take her in as their child, their adopted child for the war, and the father is the one that she forms this connection with, and he teaches her how to read and how to write, and the power of knowledge is a huge theme in this book. So there was a lot of book burning going on in World War II, and she would steal books. That's where the title comes from. Firstly, the first book she steals is called The Gravedigger's Handbook. It's from when her brother was getting buried, and then she steals another book from a book burning, a Nazi book burning, and she just continues to collect books. So the foster family that she's staying with, they decide to harbour a fugitive who is a Jewish man, and he hides in their basement, and Liesl and him also form an unlikely friendship where he writes a book to her that is kind of very metaphorical and tells of the war and the reasoning behind the war. So she forms a friendship with the Jewish man in their basement, and also her and the father have a deep connection, and her and the stepmother don't really have that much of a connection. I don't think they really get along. I don't think maybe the stepmother really wanted her there, but it's basically just her experience as a 9 through to 13, I believe, 9 through to 13-year-old of the war. But again, my favourite thing about it is the fact that it is told from the perspective of Death. And Death is not a very vicious man. I say man, I think they're male, he, him pronouns in the novel, but he's not a very malicious person isn't the right word. He's not a very malicious character in the book. He's very sad, and he takes basically what happens is someone dies and their soul is kind of just floating around their body, and so what he does really is he's just the soul collector, and is kind of giving, the way that it's explained is kind of like he's giving them rest and solace so that they're no longer turmoiling in the world where they no longer belong because they're not attached to a body anymore. But really, it is a beautiful book. The writing is amazing, and I know that was a very rambling description of it, but would highly recommend. Another modern classic is what I would call this book.